Hi, everybody. So thanks all for joining. Let's get started with today's session. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We can see that there's people from all across the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from. In today's webinar, we'll be covering data management in Salesforce for nonprofits. And we'll be sharing our findings and best practice on how to create a seamless donor and volunteer journey with the help of our two applications. So first, we'll start with an introduction on today's guest and the host. Last week, we had the pleasure of interviewing Sean Ramsey of Fortify, which was really cool. And we'll be sharing segments of that interview and our main takeaways from that. After that, we'll do a short demo of the day-to-day features to help streamline the volunteer experience in Salesforce and how to bulk clean up duplicates in the system. And in the end, we'll do a Q&A, so feel free to send over any questions that you might have through the Zoom control panel, and we'll try to answer as many as possible during the call. And altogether, the webinar should take about 35 to 40 minutes in total, including the Q&A. So let me make the introductions. Today's guest is Sean Ramsey on the right side. He's the CEO and founder of Fortify.
Thanks. Hello.
The Fortify Virtual Administrator team helps nonprofits leverage their Salesforce and connected technologies to a greater degree. Going on for 5 years and counting, they work with a wide range of clients, from smaller organizations to databases with many millions of records. And Fortify have been a valuable partner of ours since a number of years and have extensive experience using our applications. So we're very excited about Sean joining us today in the webinar, and he'll be also around at the end during the Q&A to answer any questions. Now over to us though. My name is Robert Stuur and I'm an account manager with Plauti. And to the left of me in the previous slide was Ogi, and he will do the majority of the presentation today. So that's the team on our end. To talk a little bit about our company. Plauti is the company behind Duplicate Check and Record Validation, and we're a Salesforce ISV partner that develops data quality solutions exclusively for the Salesforce platform. Our company was founded in 2011. We have 1,500 clients and counting, so going up, and we are highly rated on the App Exchange with a top 20 position on both apps. And Duplicate Check is the #1 ranking data quality app on the App Exchange. So as we mentioned before, we have two solutions. One is Duplicate Check and the other one is Record Validation. And Duplicate Check deduplicates data inside of Salesforce, and Record Validation validates phone, email, and physical addresses. The apps can work as standalone solutions, but there can all be there are also several use cases where they combine, and they actually make for a really great combination. So you can deduplicate and validate the data at the same time. We have a wide range of clients, from small local charities up to larger organizations with millions and millions in records and anything in between. And these are some names we're very proud of. ACLU, CARE, Amnesty International, the list goes on and on. So we're very proud of these. I'm now going to hand over the mic to Ogi, though, who will do the remainder of the presentation and the product demonstration. So give it up for Ogi.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, for the introduction. I hope everyone can see the screens as well. Yeah, so for today's topic, it's going to be a mixture of challenges nonprofits face and how we help them. Maybe challenges caused by COVID, and just in general, what can we do to help nonprofits with these data quality and challenges twice, but okay. And as Robert said, we interviewed Sean Ramsey. I found him very knowledgeable. I hope Robert finds it as well, and I think a lot of clients that he serves do as well. And we asked him some questions, which we'll kind of showcase today. And at the end, we'll do a short demo showing one of the features of our apps that generally makes life easier. So the first question we asked Sean was, what would you say has changed since COVID-19 in the nonprofit Salesforce world? This is what he had to say about that.
So the pandemic really introduced a problem around how do we recreate that? And they immediately turned to creating, there are just tons of webinars, tons of online touch point opportunities that they were trying to craft. That meant having systems like Zoom, and then figuring out how to integrate those tools into Salesforce, in my world. But I think the other aspect was, to your point of the energy around, is our database set up well for this problem? Because now the need to make sure that all of my emails are good and clean and I don't have duplicates and I'm really touching these people, uh, it just seemed like there was a lot of emphasis around that. I know we got a lot of questions about, can you produce reports on the amount of X, Y, and Z, people with the number of work emails or whatever
Yeah.
type of emails, um, and how can we better segment our data so that we can, do email list campaigns around the segmentation and stuff. People really started turning more and more around email marketing strategies.
Yeah. So a couple key points that we take away from this clip is how can we recreate or even improve the fundraising efforts, and keeping in mind COVID-19 happened and the usage of online apps to maintain existing and new relationships has increased. A result of this is, of course, that you effectively get more data. And with more data, of course, there's also more room for error. So one of the key questions here is your data setup good enough to tackle these new problems? And how do you set up your data to actually combat this? And I'll talk a little bit more about integrations later on in the webinar, but to give a sneak peek, what we found is that a lot of nonprofits are using a lot of integrations. And due to COVID pandemic, this tool stack is, of course, ever growing, which means it's more important than ever to be actively involved with email marketing strategies, to report on these initiatives, so you know the emails you're actually sending out and the data you're sending out is actually being received, and one, being delivered to the right person, and two, of course, not being delivered twice. But what about challenges in general? I know we talked about COVID and digitalization, but to dive a little bit deeper into the subject, we asked Sean the following question, and that was, can you talk a little bit more about the data quality challenges you and your clients in the nonprofit sector face while using Salesforce? This is what he had to say about that.
So the challenges around that are that Salesforce is super good at that, but it also really requires that it's a best of breed model. So when we're talking about Salesforce, it handles all the CRM aspects, but we still need a fundraising platform, and we still need an events platform, and we still need a volunteer management platform, and all of that data integrates into Salesforce. So that means there's a higher level of need around data, uh, curation and nurturing, around duplicates, around the accuracy of data, right? Which is the source of truth for us. So that's a huge challenge for nonprofits. And if you don't have the acumen to really figure out that problem, and if you don't have the tool to figure out that problem, you're out of luck. You just end up with a lot of really bad data, and then you end up with a really untrusted data source, which is really the challenge for a lot of these people.
So what can we learn from this? As Sean said, Salesforce is really good at collecting all the donor data or gen data inside of the CRM, but you still need additional platforms like platforms for fundraising, or platforms like Classy, Give Lively. Some events platforms could be Fonteva, Soapbox Engage, or QGive. Maybe for volunteer management, you're using Init Live. And all of these integrations are creating data. And this data is being sent into Salesforce. So it's pretty important that this data is being monitored, but also cleaned up. Otherwise, as Sean said, you'll end up with bad, untrustable data, which could be a huge problem. So a pretty logical question or follow-up question from our side was, well, what are some of the problems users can experience with bad data in their Salesforce?
Yeah, so if I know that my data is unreliable, if people in my organization believe it's unreliable, then they're not going to use Salesforce or whatever tool it is as a way to manage their data. They're going to fall back to things they know, right? They're going to fall back to their Outlook, or they're going to build some spreadsheets because I can control that and I can do it easier. So the dirtier the data, the more unreliable, the more untrustworthy, right? And that's a huge problem for organizations, because they quickly abandon systems when the development team, for example, says, we're getting a lot of dupes. We just can't rely on this. We're sending out a bunch of bad mail, for example. It's a very costly problem. If I'm sending out postage to do a campaign, but a lot of it's bad data, that's pretty costly,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah, as I said in the last slide, you end up with untrusted data. And to paraphrase Sean, if users don't trust the data they work with, they're going to fall back on, for example, Outlook, Gmail. They're building spreadsheets outside of the CRM. They just do the things they do to make it easier for them because the data they're working with can't be trusted. This isn't the only big problem. Another big problem here is that, as I said, development or marketing teams are sending out emails, sending out postage campaigns, but there's a lot of bad data being used. So the materials you're sending out are not being read, or even worse, they don't even reach the intended recipient. And because these emails are bouncing, the physical address is not valid. The donor is in the system twice and he gets twice the information. And you get where I'm going. This just generally means there's a waste of resources, a waste of time, waste of efforts, but also, of course, a waste of money. Because imagine sending duplicate postage campaigns over and over again to your donors. For one, it's duplicate costs, and for the second, if you send the same information over and over again and it's literally the same, the message seems a little bit less important, which is also not something you actually want. So to summarize what we learned, if users don't trust the data, they fall back on other systems. If data is incorrect, you end up with wasting resources. And seeing as this data we're talking about comes from a multitude of sources, we, of course, ask Sean, well, what can you give us some examples of integrations used by nonprofits and how they handle duplicate data?
Form Assembly has a good integration with Salesforce, but in terms of how it manages to try to tie new data together, it's not overly sophisticated. It's a simple either first name, last name, email connection, or last name, email type thing, unless you rig it to pass in a variable, like pass in an ID that you can be more explicit about. Fundraise Up has a really good Salesforce connection. They've done a lot of work around that, but again, they don't presume to try to solve the duplicate problem. They assume that they're going to put data in, and you're going to figure out how to kind of manage that, right?
Yeah. Again, we're on a learning streak here, but what have we learned? As Sean said, a lot of integrations that nonprofits work with lack duplicate management. So they assume that the data you're putting into Salesforce is unique, and if it's not, well, it's to you as a user to fix this, to manage this. And as we recognize or actually found, is that the latter is not always the case. As we talked about before, organizations usually lack a duplicate management system, and this leads to a multitude of problems, as I talked before. But there's also data that doesn't come in via integrations. Not every non-for-profit uses these tools. Some just import a list via data loader or Npsp loader. So we asked Sean, how is data typically imported in Npsp orgs? And this is what he had to say about that.
If a product doesn't have a good Salesforce connection, the nonprofits are generally left with having to do export import. And in that model, they generally use a tool called Npsp data import. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the idea of Npsp data import is that nonprofits have the potentially unique desire to import a transaction that has connected to it a person and, in Salesforce lingo, an opportunity all in one. So when it comes out of a transaction, it's Robert who purchased it. Robert has a phone number and an email, but he gave $100 and he has details around his transaction, right? Npsp data imports, unlike data import wizard, sort of the standard import function of Salesforce, is a mechanism built into the nonprofit success pack that will handle each of those things distinctly, but then make sure that they have a relationship at the end, right? So once you're done, you have both a contact and you have their opportunity, and they have a relationship. So we're starting to look at ways in which we can insert the DC merge or the DC import capability into that, so that when we're handling the contact, we're also handling duplicates and identifying those as part of that process.
Yeah, cool. So as Sean talked about DC import, we actually mean unique import. We can work with that. But to summarize what we just heard from Sean and our own takeaways, Npsp data import handles these related objects. It makes sure that opportunities, relationships all get their own place in Salesforce, in an object or in a certain record. But we've also seen that these integrations can't always find duplicates. So what ends up happening, the system creates duplicate households, accounts, and in the end, you have a John Smith with a donor opportunity, and 5 months later, the same John Smith donates again. If he's not remerged, you get skewed reporting this way. And John might be seen as a new donor, even though he has donated last year. So if you base your email or postal communication on this, this means that, or this could lead to that John might not feel like you know him, even though he spent this pretty hard-earned money to donate to your charity, to your nonprofit. So it's even more important to get everything under control and merge the records that should be merged. So to sum everything up, how can we help, or Plauti help? With our two apps, duplicate check and record validation, we can work on all Salesforce versions. It can work on standard Salesforce, on Npsp, on HEDA, or every other version. The rule of thumb here is, as long as the data is inside of Salesforce, we can deduplicate and validate this for you. And any yield value can be used to help differentiate between in a certain scenarios, what we call it, and it will help. And the deduplication can be done within or cross objects. So furthermore, we could also help with the validation of emails, formatting of phone numbers, validation of physical addresses. This can be done in batch. This can be done in automated fashion as soon as records get created. To summarize, we try to make sure that the communication you're sending out is landing or is being delivered to the right person, the right John Smith. So as I mentioned, a lot of data comes in via these integrations. So it's pretty important that you have a good sync going on. And this is the second subject I want to talk about. How can we cover these syncs/imports? In general, duplicate checker can intercept all duplicate imports or data from external platforms, meaning it can catch duplicates via API, web to lead, imports through data loader or Npsp loader, the data import wizard, flow created records. As long as it's in Salesforce, we can intercept it. And then in the end, we can generate a report, which is called a unique import or DC job report. Or we could choose to do an outer merge or a direct process. That's how we call it. So to kind of paint the picture a little bit, data gets imported in Salesforce. We check if it's a new record or an updated record, and then we say, well, is it a duplicate? No, then we don't execute an action. If it's a duplicate, then you have another step before that. Say, okay, well, do we want to use automation, or do we want to store this in a job, in a DC job or report, which we can manually go over these duplicates, or do we want to say, well, okay, if records come in and that matches certain matching percentage, so let's say it's a 96% chance of it actually being a duplicate based on the algorithms we built, it's going to get merged, fully automated. But when you do that, it's of course important to retain imported field values to merge. Some of the fields values we see as important for Npsps, but you can always fill in the gaps yourself, is if someone is an active donor, if someone is alive or deceased, if they have an email opt-in or an opt-out, what email or phone number to choose from the merge records, that sort of stuff. And in general, it will always retain child-related objects like donations and campaign memberships. And all of this stuff can be configured pretty easily in our extensive merge rules, is how we call it in DC setup. Good explanation of how it looks like when you retain certain related or child-related objects. A record exists called Jennifer. She has like a note, a case, and an opportunity, and then Jennifer donates again, and it creates a new opportunity. Now you have two Jennifers. What duplicate check can do is merge these two together. As you can see, the last opportunity here has been merged with the master record. This can be done, as I said, in an automated fashion, but actually happens every time you merge. So you'll never lose out on any related objects. For the next part, we asked Sean if he could talk a little bit more about the importance of correct and valid data. And as we heard before, bad data has a cost. So of course, we asked, well, what are the real costs of emails not making their way over to the recipients? This is what Sean had to say about that.
If my data isn't clean and it isn't up to date, then I'm sending out a bad email and I get a lot of bounces. The more bounces I get, the more my reliability rating lowers for email platforms. And now all of my constituents are starting to get sort of spam, directed to spam.
Yeah.
That's costly from a reputation standpoint, and certainly costly from a standpoint of people just missing my donation fundraising email, right?
Got it. Yeah. And that's the goal. At least you want people to donate to that certain charity.
And email campaigns are by far the #1 methodology still of most nonprofits for reaching their constituents.
So it sounds like the postal campaigns are some costs which you can really physically see that it's costing more money, but the email campaigns have much more of more of an intrinsic value in saying you don't know exactly how much you might be missing out on if these emails would not land at that.
Yeah, it's kind of in that realm of opportunity cost, right? I can't really put a direct number on it, but there's a cost there if I'm not seeing as much success with my campaigns.
Cool. So main takeaway is if the data is not clean and you have bad emails or a lot of bounces, it's not working how you want it to work. And since emails or email campaigns are the #1 tool for fundraising platforms, having correct data is pretty important. And as Sean said, the more emails that bounce, the reliability and reputation of the sender go down on all the email platforms. And future emails could end up in spam. And this is a very costly problem from both a reputation standpoint, but also from the potential missed funds from donors not receiving the email. So to summarize, because emails are the #1 tool of fundraising campaigns, optimizing them is pretty important and very key. So this ties in very nicely with record validation as well, but also the integration between duplicate check. And I know we like to drink our own champagne, but I want to talk about some of the benefits of using our tools, so duplicate check and record validation. In short, record validation can validate email addresses to ensure that emails are being received by the correct person. It can validate phone numbers, so phone calls will be made to the right number. And it can validate addresses, so the paper mail you're sending out actually makes it to your donor's house. Combine this with duplicate check, you're always making sure that you're sending one email to that specific person, that email is correct, and you will never get any duplicate communication happening. And all of this can be happening in batch or one by one. And duplicate check in general can also deduplicate inside of Salesforce marketing campaigns to ensure that the data is clean and double emails are not being sent. Clean up a legacy system as well and prevent duplicates from forming on manual and automation. I know we did a case of our own that we implemented record validation as well. And I think almost 99.4% of our emails are being delivered because we store certain values. So green is valid, amber is perhaps a catch-all policy, and red is invalid. So we actually never send out emails to contacts which have a red status code. So now about to switch to the live demo. It's the most tricky part from doing a webinar. I hope everyone can see this. If not, please leave it in the chat. And I wanted to start with DC search. This is one of the main, or actually one of the cool features of the application that helps the day-to-day user. So imagine someone calls in because they want to make a charity. You type in their name. So I do Blake Jennifer, search that contact, and it shows me if there's a duplicate found. To kind of prove this, if I do my own name, no results are found. Jennifer back. So what a user can do from this point on, so they already stopped them from creating a new record. They can open this record and it will bring them to that record page. On the record page, we also have like a tool that can check if there's already a duplicate existing. In this case, there isn't. So let me check if I have one that is. All right. So Irma Jimenez is in fact a duplicate. It shows a user similar to like the Salesforce one, but also across objects. And it also shows the matching score. So it says, well, this is a 94% chance of it actually being a duplicate. And a user can then merge from this view and then select which fields it should retain. Now it's merged. This is more on the user side, but where clients usually start is doing a search for duplicates in general. That's done in DC job. They start a new job. They say, okay, clean up contact records, just give it a name you want. Select contact. Maybe do a filter on a certain subset. Schedule this to run every day, every week. On a custom cron string as well. Hit start. And now it's going to generate a report for me, and it will showcase if I have any duplicate contacts. And if everything is correct, I have 5 groups. I view the results, open everything up at once, and you'll see that it found Giselle Mullen as a duplicate, Paul Kraft, Raphael Cleveland. And this is the beauty here is that it works with fuzzy matching as well. So you can see that Olaf is spelled out in this record, but in the other record, it's just O. Giselle spelled differently. So it still catches them, even though they have spelling errors. And the same point go here as well. Click merge, select fields you want to keep. So I know Mullen is spelled with an umlaut. Giselle is spelled with 1 L, at least that's what I think of. Merge, and then on to the next one. And then on setup, you can create your own scenarios, your own fields, set your threshold. And yeah, this sort of stuff we can always dive in later in a personal call if someone is up for it. So back to the, this is the right one. I hope everyone can see this. So back to the Q&A. Robert, I think if you could handle some questions if there are some.
Yeah, I will. All right, thank you, Ogi, for the great presentation and the demo. We'll be moving over to the Q&A session right now. After this webinar, we're going to send the recording by email so you can watch it again and share it with your team. We'll also make sure to share the recordings on our website as well. Let's see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the control panel so we can answer them for you. We already have a couple right now. So Ogi, do phone validations work worldwide in record validation?
Yeah, I think you know the exact number, but they do work worldwide.
Yeah. And another question that we got was, can you say more about how emails are checked for correctness? Is it just confirming delivery, or do you have some way of verifying that the email matches with the person we have in our data?
Cool, that's a good question. I'm not that super technical. I think it works via SMTP check. I'm not sure if you have any more information that Robert, please share.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what we're doing is a underwater ping to the email address. And through that, we get information about the user as well as the server, the way it operates, and pretty much the email as a entire package. And then we can tell to you about the kind of email behind it and that sort of thing. So we don't actually check the person behind it. We just check to make sure that the email can receive, any data being sent over to it. So it's a technical check that we're doing.
Cool. I think a couple other questions as well, they're coming in. One is, can you schedule a job that runs if the match is 95% to do the job instead of doing it manually? So I think what this person means that, if you could schedule a job and then do an auto merge on 95% and up. But if I'm misunderstanding correct, the question, Robert, please feel free to.
Yeah, I think the question is whether we can work with an auto merge rule that would run on 95%, which it can. You can place it on any kind of percentage you're comfortable with. The important point when auto merging results is making sure you're not getting any false duplicates. So, through learning how the system works, running a couple jobs, you can get insights in this, and through that you can comfortably place the auto merge rule. And it really depends on your data what the percentage should be placed on.
Yeah, cool.
And it was the auto merge.
Yeah, indeed. Can you show us how the cross-object searching works? Let me try, or I'll show you. Let me check if I have leads in the system as well. So if everything is correct, I don't have all my demo data out of my head. All right, cool. So I have a lead called Jennifer Blake, which is a duplicate lead, as you can see. But she works for La Reed Corporation, which is also an existing account. And I think I have some other examples as well of a lead to contact. I'm just looking for if I can find any. But it works similar to, so Raphael Cleveland is in fact a lead, but it's also in fact a contact. So what you then can do is say, well, okay, first merge these two contacts together and then convert them. Or you can just say, well, this lead is definitely this Raphael Cleveland. I hit the convert, it follows the convert rules. I hit convert and then it works. And this works on almost every object. Just to kind of keep in mind, there should be something that can be converted. So a lead can be converted to a contact, for example, but it's impossible to convert a lead to a note file or something else. It can show you, but there's not much that you can do with that.
All right, thanks. So the cross-object search, can definitely be done. Can you add DC check to the contact record? Yes, we can. Can be placed on any object, really. Very easy means of checking if there is a potential duplicate. I don't think we have to show that one. How do you validate physical addresses? For that one, what we use, we have an external service provider that provides us with global coverage. So worldwide coverage for, I think, 195 countries and counting. So quite a number of countries that we can cover. And through that, we can validate the data. Yeah. So calls being made out, and through that, we get the information. We can also provide you with suggestions as well. And that is the validation process.
One of the most important things I didn't show in the demo is, of course, how it works. Okay, so if everyone can see my screen right now, I'm just going to showcase the formatting of phone numbers and addresses, for example. So I'm going to use my Dutch number. And as you can see, it's going to format this to the correct format. It says correct phone number is a line type, and it's a mobile phone. Same as with email. I'll do my own email. And it's going to check, hey, email is correct and convert as a real user. If I would change stuff here, say email is correct, but verified as an invalid, bounce. And on the address part, this is very cool. As soon as I type in, or actually do my own house, I'll do lenteregen. That means spring, rain in Dutch, what people want to know. As soon as I type in lenteregen, you'll see that it has 58 addresses under where I live. So I open it up and I go and look into my house. And now everyone knows exactly where I live, but I hope you just send me postal messages instead of doing something creepy. I click lenteregen 25. And you can see it validates it. It adds the city where I live. It adds the postal code where I live, the province, and the country, the Netherlands. This can all be done manual, just as I'm typing it in and creating a record. But it can also be done in batches, and we can also do it on an automatic validate. So whenever records come in the system, they get validated to an address, the correct address, correct phone number, and correct email. So you always end up with good data. There are a couple.
There's a few more questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so a question from John. Is it possible to use information on the account to help determine if two contacts are the same? As long as the information, let's say if it's a lookup field that is defined on the contact object, we actually take it into equation while doing a contact-to-contact search or contact-to-contact comparison. So that is something we can do as long as we have the information available on the object itself. It could look towards other objects, but as long as we have it available, we can definitely use it.
And Stephanie asked, can the validation tool be featured in a web form on our website? Of course. We use, well, you could leverage REST API over one of our tools. So you can embed this on your own web form with suggestions as well. So that's definitely possible. check if I have a couple more. There are quite a lot of questions, so
it's hard to keep track, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me see what else we got.
Thanks, Geronimo. Geronimo says beautiful. Thank you.
Well, there's a question about whether we can use and or logic in duplicate check scenarios. Well, we work a little bit different in that what we do is we'll look at the information, we'll take that into regard, and we'll sort of weigh it using the matching method that is defined. And to what extent it actually scores as being a potential duplicate. So that field value, to what percentage it'll score. You could use a filter though beforehand to sort of define what should be taken into regard as far as the records that are going to be looked at. And that is something you can do under the premium edition, but it's not quite an and or sort of setup. It's more so looking at the information prior to selecting it, going into the comparison. If you want to learn more about that, we'd be happy to connect you with somebody from tech support, and we can definitely follow up on that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
I think we're there then.
We're there, yeah.
Yeah, we're also kind of running over as well, so I think it's time to start wrapping things up. So
yeah.
Oh, there's more questions.
Oh, really?
Let's see. Last one we're gonna do. Is it also possible to automatically merge the accounts automatically when you merge the contacts? They are two separate processes, two separate searches. I think you could do it with an Apex trigger, but by default, normally what you would want to do is rerun a job afterwards and treat them as is. So a contact-to-contact deduplication effort and an account-to-account effort. So that's not standard functionality. So two separate searches, two separate cleanups. I think we're there then. We're going to wrap up the Q&A section. We'll be hanging out here for a little bit afterwards. So if you do have some more questions, we'll be around, and I'll share our contact details in this slide right now. So next steps would be to possibly install duplicate check and record validation from the App Exchange. You can also visit our extensive knowledge base for more information. We have a ton of info on there. You're also welcome to schedule a call with our product experts. And for this webinar, we've tried to pinpoint topics we feel, or problems that most organizations probably are facing. But we'd be happy to learn more about your specific data challenges. So be sure to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to think with you and see if we can help solve those for you.
Sure.
You can find our website, plauti.com, duplicatecheck.com, recordvalidation.com. And the Fortify team can be found under fortify.us, and you can email Sean through sean@fortify.us. So this wraps up the webinar for today. Thank you, Sean, for the awesome interview last week. Thank you, Ogi, for the demonstration. And most of all, thanks everybody for joining us today. And we hope it was of interest for you.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
You're welcome. And if there are any questions left, as Robert said, we're going to hang out a little bit to see if there are any couple questions we can still answer.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.